Hello, everybody. Today we will be encountering Step Brothers. I don't have any predictions for today's film. I'm really excited. I just want to dive into it. Let's go. Okay, so I've collected the first series of images here. I've gotten as far as the moment where Dale is asking his father for money for pizza and for wings. The film begins with this quotation from George W. Bush. Families is where our nation finds hope, where wings take dream. I mean, obviously, the quote sets the tone for the movie. You know, if we walk into the movie theater and we sit down and we see this quote, it helps us understand what type of movie we're seeing. We are watching a comedy here, so it establishes a comedic tone. I'm also noticing that the quote is about what the film is about to a large extent. The film is about family. The film is about wings taking dream, very much so. So it is an appropriately selected quote, obviously. And the other thing I'm noticing is that it's not just humor that it seems like this quote is establishing, but it does seem like it's establishing absurdity. But what the topic of the quote is like, it's very genuine. Like, there's the idea behind the way this is being presented to us with the bad grammar and the strange metaphor. The idea behind it is very wholesome, right? And when I think about the film, because I have seen the film many times, there is a lot of wholesomeness to this film. There are a lot of good messages behind the absurdity in the film. And so I think that this quote is not only establishing humor as the tone, but maybe it is trying to establish how absurdity and wholesomeness can come into conflict with each other and create tension. I'll leave that quote here for now. The first actual, shot here is not noticeably of Brennan, but the shot is of him making a plate of nachos, and the nachos are the subject here. And they take up a inordinately large amount of space within the frame. And I guess very simply the idea here is that this is a very simple pleasure. This is something that you learn how to make when you are a kid. And perhaps the size of the plate in the image is really drawing attention to, like, if this is his perspective, how large these simple pleasures have become in his own life, because he doesn't have a lot of stuff outside of these simple pleasures in order to focus on. He doesn't have a very developed life, you might say, right? Because he's still living. I mean, it's fine living at home, but he's if I recall, like, he doesn't really have a job, right? So, which is also fun too. And I don't know if I said this before, but like excess too. I wish I'd gotten a shot where he's just heaped cheese onto this, but just an excess of cheese. So I think this is introducing the idea of excess as well. Now, this image is tough. It seems like, again, the subject here is the nachos as much as it is Brennan. But Brennan is sort of getting a little bit more and more space as we're being introduced to him. It's so weird to be introduced to Brennan inside a microwave. And the window of the microwave and the way that it frames him is fascinating. It renders him as very small. When we think about how, like, in this film, he's going to be asked to go from the space that he has inhabited, his own home, and then leave that space to go somewhere that is much less safe, and to have to inhabit a space that belongs to someone else. I think it's really interesting to me to have the focus be the nachos. Attaching symbolism to anything early in a film is risky, because you need the whole context of the film to be sure about any symbol. But I'm wondering if we're supposed to attach the nachos themselves to him. Like, there's this big dangerous world out there, and one day he's going to have to step out of. I mean, I would never think of a microwave as being safe. But you can also say that the nachos are being transformed by being inside the microwave. And And I mean, he is going to have to undergo transformation. I predict the observatory is going to have a lot to say about this image. I think there's a lot more to this choice than I'm seeing right now, but I don't want to spend too long on it. All right, so in the next image, we are introduced to Dale, and our introduction to him is smelling his own underwear to see if it is ripe enough to disqualify it for use today. We don't know what decision he reaches, but it's a great introduction to his character. And I guess whereas Brennan is represented to us as being very small initially and reduced, he is introduced to us as being very large. We get, he dominates the image. And, when you think about the film, I think that dynamic kind of fits. He dominates the spaces he's in. He seems to be much more, a little more modest about how he inhabits spaces. All right, so it's also interesting that as we're entering the film, we hop back and forth between the characters. We get a couple shots of Brennan, we get a shot of Dale, we hop back to Brennan. So it is introducing the two characters together. The film could have approached it differently and, just stuck with Brennan and then we meet Dale later, but that's not how the film chooses to do this. It introduces them together, almost like, these two entities that have something in common that unites them, even though, at this stage of the film, they really don't. They, at this point, are two strangers who have nothing that really connects them, other than very tenuously their parents. In this shot, simple pleasures again, cereal, the nachos, whatever this horrible beverage is. I'm guessing maybe it's blue Gatorade. And it's fascinating again that the shot really isn't of Brennan precisely. It's of the focus of his desires, the nachos and the cereal and the very childlike things. I guess it's also seen from the perspective of a very small child. Like you could imagine being 11 years old and having to reach up onto the counter to, pull these things down for yourself because that's how tall you are. The milk carton will be right in your face. You'd put the cereal on the counter and it'd be like right in your face. So I think the choice of camera height here is designed to emphasize how large he is relative to, how old he is kind of acting here. Okay, in our next shot of Brennan, we have him sitting on the couch in his living room. I'm noticing that the camera angle, this kind of low angle shot, it does seem to exaggerate his size relative to the furniture and the space. It does cause us to notice that he seems a little bit too big for the space relative to the activity that he is performing. Eating cereal, eating nachos, again, drinking whatever this horrible liquid is. I'm also noticing that the presence of a lot of empty space behind him. I talked a little bit before about how he's not a fully realized version of himself yet. Not that there's anything wrong with eating nachos and cereal and watching what he's watching on television at the moment, but I do think that the film is trying to get us to see him in a way where he's not fully realized, and the presence of the empty space, like the emptiness in his life, I think that's intentional. I looked up the subject of his shirt. So he's wearing like Star Wars pajama bottoms, which again feels very appropriate for somebody who's maybe 11 years old, which of course he isn't. He's in his 40s, I think. But I wasn't really familiar with who the Judds are. But I will say that this looks like one of those like baseball t-shirts to me that has like the, abbreviated sleeves, and choice of like a baseball shirt here feels appropriate here to again, render him like a child. I'll leave it to you to tell me what the significance of the Judds is instead of me trying to explain everything. I'm not all knowing. All right, so we get our first introduction to his mother, camera angle from his point of view looking up at her. What I am noticing is that the space is very much her space, with the exception, I guess, of the carton of milk in the background. We're not really being introduced to Brennan in his own space. He stands out as being completely different from everything that is around him. And, I mean, he ignores her more or less in this scene, so her being represented as being small in the background feels right as an introduction to her character. Maybe I'll notice more about this shot if I continue forward to the other images. So on TV, Brennan is watching what appears to be a yoga channel, and after his mom leaves, he, let's not gloss over this, he pleasures himself in other ways other than eating nachos, as I guess is the most discreet way of putting it. But here again, we have a simple pleasure in his life. It's interesting that the movie very quickly brings us to something that is happening on a television screen. This is not the only film we've looked at in our recent encounterings where television is given a lot of focus. I guess something else I'm noticing about this choice, because they could have put a lot of things on the television screen, I guess I'm noticing the contrast between yoga itself as an activity and things I think they want us to notice about Brennan's life here at the beginning of the film. Yoga is about self-betterment. And obviously that creates interesting tension when you apply that to Brennan as a character. And they also could have chosen a yoga channel where the person is performing yoga inside of a building. I think it's significant that they chose not only an outdoor setting, but an outdoor setting that is very beautiful, a place people would like to be. And so to me, it creates this contrast between, him staying at home all the time, all day, and then this world that's outside of his own experience. It's very, very different from his own life. All right, when we cut back to Dale, he's playing Guitar Hero. The camera angle here obviously seems to, again, exaggerate his great size relative to maybe the height he is supposed to be. The camera maybe is the height he's supposed to be, looking up at the television screen playing Guitar Hero, but he's, towering over it to the extent that we can't even see his head. And again, we have a television screen, right? So we have him playing a game, and in the previous image we had, Brennan looking at a television screen of something on TV. We kind of zoom out. I think the choice of clothing here is significant. Again, I know while this is kind of a style to, wear shirts that are a little too tight, it does kind of more read to me as a shirt that is too small in the sense that, it doesn't even necessarily go down as far as you would expect the shirt to go. So it's like he's wearing these clothes that are too small for him. That's funny. But this to me actually really jumps out as the first image that has artistic composition happening. So unlike Brennan, where we're introduced to him, yes, this is kind of his space, but it's the living room, right? So the living room is his mom's space, and this is his mom's aesthetic, right? These are the choices that she has made to I guess decorate her inhabited space. And we're introduced to him in the kitchen, again, her space, right? But when we're introduced to Dale, this is, if I understand correctly, this is Dale's bedroom, right? And it's a very composed space. I don't think this is an accident. So you've got the television centered, you've got two windows on each side, really creating a sense of balance. You've got the two lamps on each side. It's like a very balanced, ordered space. And when we think about what's going to happen in this film, this order is going to be completely disrupted. So I don't think that it is at all an accident that this space was chosen to introduce him to us. And yet the space is not perfectly ordered, right? It has imbalance to it. It has, objects that are placed within the frame that disrupt that balance, which feels very right to me, thinking about this introduction of this character. We have his father intruding a bit into his own space. We obviously have the little gag about the air freshener, given that, our introduction to him was him smelling his own underwear to determine whether or not it was too ripe to be worn. So that's a very nice joke here. But yeah, his father is being introduced as intruding into his space. Whereas the introduction of the mother is also kind of an intrusion into the space, but it's his house, right? But it's not his bedroom. It's not like his sanctum sanctorum, right? So it's interesting to me that the spaces are slightly different that the intrusion is happening in. And again, this sense of balance where he's coming in, you've got lamps on either side of him. This feels intentional to me as well. And the last image I've selected here is of Dale again, asking for money for pizza and then for wings because it's not enough money, right? And the connection between him and Brennan, both, wrong shot here. Him and Brennan both having simple pleasures that they use to occupy themselves during the day because it's kind of really all that they have. I'll leave that encountering where it is for the moment. Let's see what the observatory has to say. Okay. All right, so I spent a lot of my time talking about childhood and my own observations, and it is noting that the film may be playing a lot more with scale. Agreed. Right, we're introduced to Brennan not exactly as a person at first, but we meet him through objects: nachos, cereal, milk, television, the microwave itself. The objects are enormous. Yeah, like experientially. Yeah, I think I hit this. It's almost as though the world has been scaled to someone whose life consists primarily of immediate satisfactions. Yes. Which agree. Yeah, doesn't mean he's childish. His world is just proportioned differently. Same thing happens with Dale. The room almost functions like a child's bedroom that has simply been stretched to accommodate an adult body. Everything is just larger. That is subtly different from immaturity. Agreed. Yeah, so Brennan is introduced inside a microwave. I found that image to be the most challenging image of all of them. I know there's more there, and yeah, I did. I eventually backed away from it. I didn't want to sit there forever and ever, but maybe I should have. The microwave is a container, the television is a container, the bedroom is a container, the house is a container, yep. The film keeps introducing people inside things. Contained. Contained lives, contained pleasures, contained ambitions. Yeah. True. Both men are introduced through routines rather than personalities. Bren making food for himself on TV. Dale dressing himself, Guitar Hero. Food. Yeah, the film refuses to tell us who they are psychologically. Here's the loop they live in. So the observatory is interested in the topic of food, especially since it's something that united the two of them. So it's connecting food to the idea of time. Notice how Brennan's opening consists of preparing, eating, watching, waiting, eating. It's a rhythm, almost cyclical. Very little appears to be moving toward anything. The activities sustain the day rather than directing it. Yeah, so Brennan's mother enters a communal space. Dale's father enters a personal space. Which actually, having watched the film, this is very much a reflection of the nature of the relationships between the two sons and their parents. I feel like Brennan's mom's approach to motherhood and to family is much more communal, and she kind of allows him to be the way he is, whereas Dale's intrusion could be interpreted much more as an intrusion into Dale's personal space inherently. That's interesting. Yeah, I think the distinction does matter later. All right, so the George W. Bush quote. Yeah, sincere is the word I was looking for. I was having trouble coming up with the right word there, but sincere, the sincereness as opposed to how malformed the language is, both qualities coexist. And it's a choice to begin the comedy that way. Well, I think a lot of people would say that this comedy is beginning by mocking something. I didn't want to interpret it that way myself in my own encountering. That's the way I was trying to say it. It's like a genuinely wholesome sentiment that fails to express itself. Ooh, the failure to like express yourself. That's interesting too when we think about these two men. The heart is there, the articulation isn't. Yeah. Without getting ahead of ourselves, that sounds remarkably close to two 40-year-old men who have affection, creativity, and longing, but almost no mature language for expressing any of it. Yeah, so, yeah, I think that the quote is definitely selected because it's like these two guys are developing the language to be able to inhabit life more successfully. They have a lot to learn. Yeah, so the observatory is again reminding me to look at things that have been scaled incorrectly as a way of trying to like understand the language of this film and how it is presenting not just objects to us, but expectations, responsibilities, pleasure, even conversations. Very good tip. All right, and then before we return to another series of images, it's lastly noticing that the tension between the men feeling too big for their environments and the environments feeling too small for the lives they're actually living, keeping an eye on that moving forward. All right, let's pull up another series of images. Okay, we have our second set of images here. Tough to capture movement when you do a still, but we actually jump to a shot of the chandelier where the chandelier absolutely fills the frame. I'm reminded of the simplicity of the desires of Dale and Brennan, and then the extravagance of a chandelier being how we're introduced to, I guess, particularly Dale's father, but also introduced again to Brennan's mother. So it appears that Dale's father is leading a symposium in a hotel, and he's talking about cochlear implants. So having seen the film, I can't help but note how great a choice it is that he sells something that helps people hear, because I think that as a character he struggles a little bit to listen to the people around him. And while I do understand his frustrations, he could use a little help listening too. It is a large space filled with people, so the contrast between Brennan and Dale living very singular lives without a lot of people in their lives, and how the parents are very much integrated into the community outside of their homes, seems obvious. I love the second introduction to Brennan's mother. I love the lighting and how she just pops out of this sea of people. Another object of desire. The film has been focusing on that quite a bit. I mean, not that he isn't an object of desire too, he's a handsome man, but an object of desire. And yeah, that's where this goes. They end up getting a room in the hotel. It seems like it would be a room in the hotel because of the wallpaper. So you can see in the background where he's giving this speech in the symposium, it's got the wallpaper in the background. I think it's designed to help us understand that, this isn't their home, or it's not some They just went, they got a room, and they're satisfying their desires here. And I guess what jumps out at me is the film has chosen to introduce Brennan through communal space, Dale through personal space, and the two of them through borrowed space. Because it is what a hotel room is, essentially, right? I mean, you pay money, but you borrow the space. I think there's more to that idea. And it's important, to sit and notice as much as we can, but I also think it's important to try to keep the pace of the videos reasonable, so I'll let the observatory tackle that one. I think it's interesting that she's framed by the window, and that even though we can't see it here, the window has this really beautiful potted flower in front of it, and then she's sort of being aligned with that flower behind her as an object of desire and beauty. And I mean, we don't have to be told she's beautiful, right? Now, I know it is a hotel room, and hotel rooms tend to have this very neat composition, so I want to try to restrain myself from reading too much into the composition of the space, but it is interesting that she's centered within the space. She's the one who's framed by the window. She's the one where the lights kind of compositionally anchor her. And that, I think that's an interesting choice, especially since like how he's on the side looking in, and then in the next shot where they go and they have sex on the bed. They picked a hotel room that has this division in it, where you've got this left side and this right side, and they undress together here on the left side, and then they go together on the right side, and they get to know each other, so to speak, on the right side of the room. That's an interesting choice. Oh, and I was talking before in the symposium, I don't think I finished this thought. I was talking before about how they started with the chandelier. The camera moves to the left, and then we see Dale's father. I really should look up their names. But at this point in the film, this is the first time the camera has ever moved. And I did notice in the sequence of images leading up to Brennan talking to his mom in the car, that movement is really being introduced here as an idea, which makes all sorts of sense. Even though it's very subtle movement, the way the camera chooses to move. Before we had stills where the camera was not moving, still shot of the nachos, still shot of Brennan. Yeah, the camera was sort of doing shot reverse shot, looking at different things within the space, but it was still shots. And now we have camera movement being introduced because things are moving and things are happening. One thing the observatory noted was the amount of space that is given to things. And I think it's interesting that when these two characters first meet, very little space is given to the conversation that they have that creates the initial bond between them. Initially it was recognition of desire, and then satisfying the desire, and then they talk to each other, and it's a very quick conversation about shared interests where they recognize that they both have these children in their lives who are old, living with them at home, and that this is a way that they bond, because I would imagine for them it's hard to find somebody to talk to about this, who recognizes what this experience is like for them. So it makes sense to me that this will be a powerful way that they initially bond. Yes, they talk about travel. Yes, they talk about this other aspects of their lives, but anyway, I think I've covered that enough. So we have the actual reception ceremony at the wedding, and you can see Dale here and Brennan, who are put on opposite sides of the room, which illustrates the gap that exists between them initially in their relationship. It's interesting that they've been thrust into a community that, I mean, in no way is a reflection of them. You don't see anybody else really that's, I don't want to say their age, because I guess there are some people here who are about their age, but they don't really feel like they inhabit this group of people in a comfortable way. You know, when you imagine going to a wedding, you imagine there's going to be other people at that wedding who, some of whom are like you know, and they just really don't fit in to this space at all. I also think it's interesting the way the shot is composed. You might be tempted making this film to have like placed Dale over here on the far left side of the image to create this sense of mutual opposition where they occupy similar spaces in the frame. And while they are both sort of not centered and they are cast off to the sides, they're not cast off to the sides equally. If you were going to like call this a two shot, for instance, right? Like Dale occupies the center of the space more or less that is assigned to him. And we were talking about how it seems to me, like it feels like he's being represented to me as somebody who dominates the spaces that he inhabits, whereas within the half of the frame that is allocated to Brennan, he's not centered inside his own frame. He's cast off to the side of that space again. So it feels like a very scattered way of presenting him as opposed to the way Dale is represented. I think that choice is intentional and fascinating. And again, Dale is closer to us. Brennan is further away in the background. Here in this shot, and you know, if you're going to say that like this is just a coincidence, right? Which it could very well be, right? I'm just noticing things, but the fact that we get a two shot right after that of them occupying the space relatively equally together, it feels like this, if this is going to be seen as a kind of a two shot, that these choices are deliberate, perhaps. Okay, I actually didn't take a snapshot here because it was a two shot. The reason I actually took this shot, or the snapshot, is because this is another moment where we get some camera movement. So the camera starts with the two of them balanced within the frame, and then it elevates like above them to look down at the people who are attending the wedding. So we get, you know, lots of very subtle suggestions of movement here. I also can't help but note that we are continuing with the idea of, maybe borrowed is the wrong word, but borrowed space again. So again, right, so Dale personal space, Brennan communal space, and then, you know, it's not like they're getting married inside their own home, they're borrowing a space again. And yet again, I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but I think the observatory will be very, very helpful here. Interesting that the film has chosen to include a space again that has chandeliers. I mean, I guess, you know, getting married is very much a moment of everything coming into harmony and balance again, but the choice at the beginning to, I mean, I didn't do a snapshot of it, but it's like the snapshot was of the chandelier completely filling the frame. And to go from that shot to a shot where we have chandeliers again, I don't know if there's anything there, but I'm just going to notice it. All right, so the two parents address the attendees of the wedding. Both of their sons freak out and leave the wedding for more or less similar reasons. Nice balanced shot here. Pretty much exactly what we would expect of a wedding. I don't see any reason to dwell on it. I mean, I guess what I'm noticing here about this Dale shot is, you know, just the idea of the table, not the tablecloth, but the, it's not a napkin, not thinking of the right word, but, you know, this almost kind of having like a bib-like appearance, the way he's tucked it into his suit. It's obviously something we're supposed to notice. But what I am actually noticing that is more interesting is that he is, you know, we had this shot before of them in the crowd being represented within the space very differently. And then here, they're actually being matched to each other. So we have him on the right side of the screen looking to the left, and then we have Brennan on the right side of the screen looking left. Immediately suggesting a connection between them, even though no such connection really exists yet. But I think this choice to kind of match them is interesting, just noticing it. I mean, they certainly have the distaste in common, right, that you can see in their facial expressions. How could I not capture the I didn't want salmon, I asked 4 times moment? I guess what is interesting about this shot is that they very easily could have chosen to center him in the frame for this moment. But as has been the case with Brennan, it's the food that's being centered more in the frame. I think it is giving the more central position. And he's freaking out about the food not being right, as, maybe for him, this is really the only thing about the wedding that holds anything appealing at all. And then I guess, they got this wrong and he's really upset about it. And so while he's making this moment very much about him, I guess maybe for him it's the food. It's the simple desire, the simple pleasures that have been messed up. I'm sure there's something interesting about we're at a wedding, right? So you expect to see a lot of huge arrangements of flowers. Could just be, pretty. They wanted it in the background behind him, aesthetically pleasing. But I do wonder if there's something there. We talked earlier in our encountering about excess. Weddings they can be very much about excess. And yeah, we get this last image of her driving Brennan to where he's going to be living now with Dale's father. Here again, we have movement. Here again, we have containment, which we talked about earlier. He's in the back seat of the car, not really inhabiting the space we would expect I later learned a 39-year-old man. We would not expect a 39-year-old man to be sitting in the back necessarily, so I guess a few last things that I'm noticing before we go over the observatory and check in with it. Now, I know that, people never sit and almost never sit in the middle seat in the back seat of a car, but I can't help but notice again that Brennan is off to the side again, not centered. He is kind of like a passenger in his own life, being moved around from place to place. Feels very appropriate for him to be in the back seat, not just because of the joke of it, being where a kid might be a little more likely to sit, perhaps, but I would guess that a lot of attention went into picking these shirts that he's wearing. So I don't have the other image, but actually I'm going to pull it up. So the other shirt he was wearing was blue with blue pajamas. This is before his life has been, tossed upside down. Also, blue drink. Also, blue yoga, more or less. Lots of blue. So to me, this feels very like he's calm, he's in his own space, he knows what to expect. Calm, cool, and collected, right? But for his introduction to the moment that he's being moved to a new space that is unfamiliar and unsafe, a red shirt. He's obviously upset. He's obviously angry. He just stormed out of the wedding. I don't think there's more to it than that, but I think that the choice of color here is meant to help us realize his emotional state. Not that we need a lot of help, but I would guess that moving on through the film, they're going to have quite a few, Dale and Brenner are going to have quite a few things that they wear, and that, like the Judd's shirt, there's probably something there, like if you really look at it and dive into it. And yeah, I'll leave this encountering right here. And let's see what the observatory has to say. All right, let's take a look at what the observatory has to say about the second set of images. I found this film to be a little tougher than I expected. It's really hard in the beginning of films to find your grounding. I mean, you get like halfway into the film and then suddenly I'm noticing things all over the place. Found its language, All right. So this set makes film feel much more complicated than two childish men versus functional adults. Movement enters with the parents. It wants to sharpen it slightly. The camera begins moving when the film enters socially sanctioned adult machinery. Yeah, okay, so like symposiums, weddings, got it. These are not just adult spaces, they are spaces where adult life is organized by institutions, money, etiquette, rented rooms, schedules, public recognition. Brennan and Dale's worlds are static loops. Yeah, and the parents are attached to a larger social machine. And yeah, I agree, the film is making that adult world look ridiculous too, where you have this... Oh, I didn't connect that, that's good. Where you have the oversized shot of the nachos that Brennan has, but then you have the oversized shot of the chandelier to introduce Dale's father in the adult world. That's cool. Yeah, the parents' world is also excessive. Chandeliers, podiums, rented ballrooms, huge floral arrangements. I now understand the huge floral arrangement behind Brennan. Yeah. Yeah, and I like that. That's one of the things I like about this movie. Yes, Brennan and Dale are ridiculous, but the film is not simplistically only looking at them as being ridiculous. There's a lot of absurdity in the film. Yeah, some versions of excessive desire and appetite and ritual and vanity are socially approved, and some are not. It's like a fascinating tension between the two. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it brings it back to the sincerity of the initial quotation from George Bush and the absurdity of the language, but sincere sentiment. Mm-hmm. Yes, it agrees about Dale's father as presenting technology that helps people hear, but it's perfect for a film about family dysfunction. He can explain hearing, he can sell hearing, he can command a room about hearing, but can he listen? That's great. Yeah, so we have speech that fails. Hearing is technologized. Ooh, big word. Children who don't listen. Parents who may not listen either. Well, we've seen the film. I'd say for the most part, that's true. Yeah, so likening her to an object of desire, for Brennan, nachos, for Dale, pizza wings, Guitar Hero, personal territory, for Robert, Nancy, right? Oh, thank you, Observatory. You gave me the names that I meant to look up. Robert and Nancy, that's right. The jump from nachos to Nancy is absurd. Yeah, in fact, it's obvious that at this stage of the film, every single character has some sort of object of desire. All of these things are being connected together. I never would have guessed that, before encountering this film. Yeah, I knew when I was talking about the borrowed space idea, there's more to it, but I could have spent 20 minutes sitting with the image and come up with something, maybe. But so their intimacy happens in a room that belongs to neither of them. It's not home, it's not yet family, it's a rented container for desire. But yeah, the romance is impulsive, temporary, spatially uprooted. And as a result, there's some instability being introduced. Yeah. The sons are stuck in rooms, the parents move through rooms. But certainly those rooms are not necessarily deeper if they're borrowed spaces. Yeah, and I touched on this. It's a fully adult, ceremonial space. Brennan and Dale just do not belong to this space yet. Ornate is a good word to describe the space. It is communal, but yeah, expensive. Yeah, so Dale occupies his zone with more weight. Brennan feels pushed further out, more scattered, less in command of the half of the frame he's been given. Dale dominates personal space. Brennan is more overwhelmed by communal or parental space. Yeah, so the shots where Dale and Brennan are matched to each other, they're not emotionally connected yet, but the film is already editing them into equivalence. Same disgust, same refusal, same inability to accept the adult ritual on its own terms. Well, I would say this is the second time the film is acting like it knows something before the characters do, because also the choice to introduce them together instead of a very different and completely reasonable choice of like just sticking with Brennan and then encountering Dale now for the first time at the reception, right? This is a very, very different and deliberate approach. They are already a pair. They just haven't discovered the pairness yet. Yeah. The food is still central when he's talking. I actually think I have that image up, the salmon. Yeah, the food is still central. At the wedding, a ritual of love, social union, Brennan's crisis is salmon. Yeah, food is the organizing object of his emotional world. Huh. It is simply placed his small desire inside a larger, more embarrassing public space. And we were talking in Turning Red, the last encountering we did, we were talking about the difference between embarrassment and humiliation. I think for Brennan and Dale, it's going a little bit more into humiliation than just embarrassment. Yeah, image 24 is quietly brutal. He's not driving, he's not even in the passenger seat, he is being transported. Indeed, movement has entered the film, but Brennan is not yet moving himself. He's being moved by decisions made above, around, and for him. Yeah, like he's a passenger in his own life. It's actually unusual for the observatory to agree with a read of color from me. I tend to focus a lot on color, but yeah, blue is like stasis, comfort. Interesting. Appetite and self-contained routine. Here, red announces emotional alarm. It is being disrupted. Well, we're going to stop the video pretty soon here, so there's not going to be a next passage, but if, we were going to re-encounter this film, and I'll give you my, list of topics that came up, feel free to suggest other topics that you think that we hit that I may not have touched in my list, but if we do ever re-encounter this film, we can dive deeper into one of these ideas and take it to its conclusion in the film. Yeah, so Brennan and Dale's fantasies are private, repetitive, and enclosed. The parents' fantasies are public, romantic, ceremonial, socially validated. And the film does, I've seen it, it does scramble that distinction. Yeah, all the parents' things look more mature than the kids' things, but all of them are staged. All of them involve people performing versions of themselves. And yeah, I guess we'll conclude with this question. Does the film actually distinguish adulthood from childishness, or does it distinguish between approved and unapproved forms of fantasy? It's a good question. Well, anyway, I think enough has emerged here. Something that I am trying to balance, I would guess that some of you out there might have wished I'd gone a little bit deeper into the film. And this is only this is my fourth encountering video, so I'm still trying to feel out the length of the videos, because I do know that they can become long. But when you think about like very similar setup, right? Like looking at a chess game and how long a video about a chess game can take. It can take over an hour easily. It could even get up to like approaching 2 hours or even over 2 hours. Now, I don't know if these videos should ever hit that length, but when you're this idea of sitting and noticing, and I think there's tension between how deep you get in the film, but the act of noticing itself needing its own time and space to sort of live and breathe. And I do think the more important thing, because I'm very interested in how we inhabit spaces, and I want to draw attention to the act of noticing is something that deserves more space in life, I think. I think we go through our lives so quickly, and we let things just pass us by, and we don't stop and be present in moments. And so I'm trying to model presence within space. So I would never want getting deeper into the film to just completely, cause us to move at a pace where we're just not honoring the idea of noticing anymore. But I do recognize that I need to start trying to find the sweet spot. Because again, I would guess some of you would wish I'd gotten deeper, and there are skills that can be learned that could maybe have allowed us to get there. And I'm a human being, and I'm going to do my best to sort of find the sweet spot in all these encounterings. Let me know in the comments what you think about any number of things. And it was a pleasure exploring this film with you. I absolutely love Step Brothers, and I'm really hoping that somebody invites us to do a re-encountering this film that allows us to go deeper, because this is one of my favorite movies. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.